They're gonna catch my checklist. That's a bad bet.
Welcome back to Never Fade, the NFT podcast. I'm your host, FaXx. We're coming off of a very interesting and special episode with Jack Butcher. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed that. We are going to spend a little time unpacking that episode today. You know, something that Jack said that I had not heard before is he used the term communication inflation. And when you think about this, social media, Twitter, other platforms, they kind of brought us to this point where there's sometimes almost like too much information. And if you kind of take the wrong turn, you might go down an avenue where you're not getting that much value from what you're listening to. And we really value your time. We value our time. So our goal here at the Never Fade podcast is to try to produce information that really will, stimulate you and be actionable when it comes to NFT collecting and trading. And so I think that we would be doing our listeners and ourselves, and for that matter, Jack Butcher, a disservice if we didn't take some time here to unpack some of the takeaways from that episode, which I thought were lit. And if you are new to Never Fade, thanks for joining us. We've done a number of episodes now. I'll point you back to another great episode that we did with Ryan Wyatt, who is the president of Polygon Labs. And he is another really bright mind in the space. And then after the Ryan Wyatt episode, that's when we kind of got into the trilogy of checks. We essentially did an episode where we talked about us getting into checks. And somewhat selfishly, that was for me because I was trying to learn about the ecosystem still and start to collect those. And my co-host, Goodmonth and our resident check expert, Mitch Morales, really helped with that. And then following that episode, we met with Shrimpto, who is the largest holder of visualized value checks. And then, of course, we were graced with the presence of Jack Butcher himself. Goodmonth, what are your thoughts and feelings after having the opportunity to spend some time with Jack and pick his brain?
Yeah, I think Twitter said it best. I mean, that interview alone on Jack's perspective is early, and I think it's a time capsule into the way he thinks. You know, we knew going into the podcast that he thinks different. We knew that he thinks in buildings, in designer sprints and building sprints. And we really focused the questions on thought process and philosophical fortitude, and he just didn't disappoint. You know, I think it's a little bit rare when you go into an interview with somebody and you have expectations and then they surpass those expectations. Because the only reason why we do Never Fade is to bring people on who we believe in as builders that are going to be here for the long haul. So our expectations are really high, and everyone that we bring on meets those, and that's a beautiful thing. But to exceed is impressive. I think one thing to call out about Jack specifically in that interview was his ability to take in current and active information and be able to process and articulate what might be happening right now in this moment. And that's really crucial. It's not what is happening in this moment as an absolute, it's what might be happening. And then he plans to take that as a data point that then he'll make future decisions off of. I think that's lost on a lot of people.
Yeah, I got a lot of very positive feedback for people who tuned into that episode. I think that there was a demand for some of these like high level thoughts from Jack. I think that he's been very busy building, and he's done some Twitter spaces and such, but I felt like this was really like an environment where he could let some of those thoughts breathe. And why do you think like the interview went so well?
I think we treated him like a builder. I think we really had respect for what he's done for checks and what he's done in his past from an art perspective. You know, most guests, I actually do a deep dive on their being, the person behind them, their background. I didn't do that with Jack. Like, I went into this conversation knowing Jack from how I've interpreted visualized value and how I've interpreted checks. And I kind of went into this interview just understanding my interpretation of him through his art. So I think that's how we treated him, is the amount of art that he's put forth. And I think that made it an enjoyable conversation for all parties involved.
Yes, I'm really happy we could take some time today to kind of take stock regarding the show and kind of our goals here for the podcast, which I think big picture is to bring in builders who we have a lot of reason to believe are here to stay. You know, we want to meet with and speak to people who have a track record of contributing to the space and have also given us a compelling reason to believe that they are going to be here for the future, because then we can kind of pick their brain as to like where they think things are headed, as well as give us kind of current takes on what's going on, and then also gives us the opportunity to, as time passes, loop back around with those people and see kind of like what has progressed and get updated takes from them. So that's kind of the goal here. And going back to this particular interview with Jack, there was some like kind of like headline moments, I want to say. And one of them was when, first of all, man, I got to give you credit, Ged. Like the questions that you posed to Jack, some of your takes and responses, I think are what elevated that interview. And one of the subjects that you guys were riffing on for a minute was time warping provenance. And it appears that Jack is time warping provenance. So I'd really like to like revisit that a little bit here. And like, what did you think about that particular part of the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, in response to that question is when he hit with the connected consciousness. If I remember correctly.
You're right. Yeah.
That was pretty mind-blowing. Now, with that question, I had been thinking about that question in my background processes of my mind. I wasn't planning to ask it. I knew I was going out on a limb. I kind of felt like that big squirrel that's on the tip of a limb and it's about to hit the ground. I'm like, this question it's not going to land. It's not going to land. And then once I asked it, the limb started coming back up and I got real close back to the tree. So I did feel overextended a bit on that question, but he just smacked it out the park. And I think he understood very quickly that time's progressing quicker. The oversaturation of communication is happening more. Attention is getting less. He understood this time-space consortium of value, of virality, of experience. And I think he really jived with it. One thing that I also said on the podcast was that I think CryptoPunks are ugly, but the provenance makes them stand out. And I got a little smile from him there. And I'm not saying Jack thinks that CryptoPunks are ugly. I'm not saying that. But I think what really hit was the fact that provenance has a value, even though a lot of people don't understand what the word means. Something that carries weight over a significant amount of time, no matter how long that time is, as long as it's significant to the item, that packs value, which packs power, which makes sense. And when you talk about packing value and packing power and having it make sense to what someone would pay for it, you've already lost 95% of the world on trying to follow why it's valuable. And we've talked about this on the pod before about taking things literal. The majority of people, when they take things literal, they miss the point. It's literally very easy to discount value on everything. You can look at anything you don't need and you can say it's not worth it. You can look at the new MacBooks that come out by Apple. If you have a MacBook that works fine, you can call it overpriced. But now you're in the market for a MacBook and you need the newest and latest and greatest, and you pay the price of a MacBook. Why? Because you're paying the price to have a MacBook. Because you need a MacBook. But if you have one and WWDC from Apple is promoting to you the newest Mac, and here's the price, you know, it's gracious that they actually tell you what the price is when they announce the product, because I don't think they have to. They have a brand that's created value. They have a provenance of executing and providing a reliable service and product that, if you're not in the market, honestly, the price shouldn't even concern you. But if you need it, there you go.
And when you bring that back to NFTs, it was kind of like another highlight moment in my mind, which was the use of a kind of phrase that NFTs capture the economic energy of something
Yes.
going viral.
Yes.
You know, the economic energy of something going viral, right? And like that literally is the case, right? When you see something like checks go from 0.0066 ETH to over 2 ETH, but also like figuratively, because, you know, the economic energy, like as like that's a term that is a pretty rare term. I hadn't really heard it be used in that context before, but it kind of does like summarize to some degree like what we're doing out here. And you know what? Like some of these projects that have kind of maybe seed all-time high and then faded to, I don't want to say irrelevancy, I don't want to be mean, but you know, the reality is like, do you think in those cases the economic energy was spent, it was expended, or, you know, how can a project, how can an NFT founder retain and build on the economic energy that can be captured when things go viral?
Before I answer that question, I think economic energy was one of my big takeaways from the podcast. I've used it on calls with brands and customers since then. Makes a lot of sense. I think it's been my belief in Web3 that that's the value, but I've never put it in that terminology before. And if you're consuming anything, why does it not retain economic energy? And that is what NFTs do, or anything on the blockchain, it puts it into a market that could be bidful. So it's important. But to your question, it's a great question. But I think there's one important ingredient to the cocktail of taking advantage of the virality is I think you have to be a hopeful MFer. I think when you look at Gordon Goner, when you look at Frank D. Gods, when you look at Jack Butcher, and I don't really care whether those three people are similar or completely distinct of one another. I'm not making comparisons. But all three of those people have delivered hope to their holders at scale. There was something about the Gordon Goner avatar when BAYC was minting that, paired with the way those tweets were being hit on Twitter by the character behind that monkey before we knew the person behind it, there was something behind that persona that people wanted to lift up collectively. They wanted to see Gordon Goner win. Now, Garga's taken over the ship for BAYC because of health issues with Gordon, and we hope he's doing good. And Garga stepped up to the plate, but the juice was with Gordon. The hope was with Gordon. Frank D. Gods comes around, and this dude's just relentless as hell. We don't know what he can or can't do. We don't actually know how talented he is. He talks a lot. He says a lot of bullish things, but his community loves him. And his community puts him up above everybody. And they want to see him win. And I think he's been very humbled by some things that's happened to him. And I think he dons that hope, and he takes it as responsibility. And I got to say the same with Jack Butcher. There's people are rooting for Jack. I'm rooting for Jack. I want Jack to be one of the greatest names in the space, and I want a piece of what he creates. Do I want to compete with Jack? No. Do I want to get rich off Jack? No. Do I want to hold a piece of greatness because I think Jack's got the juice? 100p.
Yeah, and one of the things that he does, his approach, that I find particularly bullish, is the ethos that he has to like really engage with and try to build with the community, right? And this is something that you touched on too in that conversation, is how much what he's done is really like giving to holders, and the opportunity for holders to build their own narratives with it, to kind of help curate the pieces and so on. And so like the answer to this question of how do you sustain, the economic energy of something that's gone viral, where all other gravitational forces are going to like want to kind of pull that thing back to earth. I think it comes back to the holders and what is value to the community. Like, are they really fans of the art, the process? Like, what is it that they expect? Like, what is it that they're gaining from this? And I'm not talking about financially, right? I'm talking about vibes, the feeling of being part of something that has the potential to be historic, the opportunity to collaborate with and speak to people who are on the same wavelength of culture, of art, and this kind of thing. And I think we're seeing that blossoming here with this particular collection. And the other thing is like the underlying value of what Jack's already done. Like there's this whole proof of work concept here, where if you look, like he's been grinding on his own, making educational programs, making designs, making art, building on, social media channels, inspiring people, helping people with business strategies, helping people with mindset, all of this leading up to this art release. And so I feel like naturally this can all kind of like gel. Now, the guy at the same time, he's figured out ways to bottle lightning that, this is rare, right? This is like a once in a while thing.
One of the things you mentioned about the holders that I think is important is when you think about BAYC launching back in 21 and in April, it gave people like not only hope, but it gave them like the energy behind their purchase to go build a brand, to go do something with it. Some people just put it on hats or put it on shirts. Some people started entire companies. Some people transition existing company brands over to that IP. So that was like, that was a feather in the cap. And then when D-Gods came around with Frank, it was like all these people started to find each other on the Solana chain. It was like rallying up a connective tissue of Solana. And that was a feather in the cap. And then Jack Butcher, one thing I'm noticing is a lot of people are going like, they're starting to get into color theory. They're starting to get into, they're like adapting to aesthetics in a very basic ingredient to art, and that's color theory. And I'm also seeing a lot of people purchase token frames. Very interesting, because I've been buying digital art for 3 years now. Sounds crazy to say that, but been buying digital art for 3 years now, and I've got neon signs made of them, but I don't have a token frame. I have Samsung frames all over the house that I could throw them up on, but I don't have a token frame. And I've always kind of been like, why don't I have a token frame? What's the blocker for me? But it's Jack. It's checks. I want a token frame now because I want that NFT connected to the metadata refresh. I want my 4-year-old kid to come tell me that Jack's hit update. I love you, Jack, but I don't want to have your Twitter tell me that you've hit the metadata refresh. I want my kid to come up to me and be like, have you seen what Jack threw? You know?
Oh, I fucking love that take. I love that take. Oh, that's fucking good. Oh man. So another thing that he kind of like, I think.
Tears to his eyes, Hazy. We're bringing tears to his eyes. This guy, he's got tears in his eyes. He's been worrying about his Kobe Bryant frame this whole time, but now that it's straight, now that it's levered, he's good to go, bro.
I'm going off cam, dude. I'm going off cam, dude. Give me a break. Oh man.
No, dude, but that's for real. And I think that goes back to connected consciousness. Like, I want to share it with my kid, and I want to have that interconnectivity explained to my kid. I think having a human behind art with the blockchain being the intermediary and ownership being had, that's a special moment. I think being able to tell people, I own that picture, I own it, but there's a person that controls the refresh. His name's Jack Butcher. You can follow him on Twitter, and that's the story. And I think if museums decentralize and can maybe sell open editions of relevant pieces of art that are digital into homes, I think that's a pretty powerful sales mechanism.
Yeah, no question about it. And just looping back to something that you brought up regarding Frank and D-Gods, there was an event at NFT Paris, and there was a particular video of a bunch of dudes just having a bro down moment, busting dance moves, doing the worm. Granted, the person doing the worm was probably like the least flexible person in the group, so maybe he shouldn't have been one. But man, did these guys catch like a lot of heat about, oh, there's no females there and da 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 da, like
just fun. And like for me, like I found it to be very, very disappointing. Oh, what do we got, dude? What do we got? Good's gonna show us how to really bust a worm. There it is. It's the reenact. There he is. Showing us how it's done. There you go, dude. We're gonna have to clip that. We're gonna have to share that. Let's fucking go.
But yeah, man, I think it was like the fun was cool, right? And the reality is, in my opinion, is like, bro, all these people showed up to NFT Paris and were just that bullish and are just like having that much fun and bringing how much energy. I'm super bullish on that video. When I saw that video, I was like, oh, dude, this is not like, I had no idea that people were going to go to Paris and just rage and just be so hyped to be together and be around each other. Now, personally, is that like my scene? Not necessarily, However, I see why that could be such a great value for, maybe that age group or people who, need a friend, man, in this day and age. Need a friend in this day and age, man. But it's a cold world. And we have the opportunity to have like this global interconnectivity and establish real friendships and really meaningful relationships through the internet and through NFTs. And I think that was a manifestation of that. So I'm bullish on it. I love to see it. And like, I give kudos to like everybody involved that was bringing like that kind of spirit that made people feel so comfortable to have that moment.
Yeah. I mean, look, there was no violence in that video. There was no negativity in that video. So to bring negativity and comments to that video is adding a negative energy to something that had no negativity in it by nature. I think it's ridiculous. I think if anybody is a parent, they understand that all they want for their kids is to be happy. All they want for their kids is to live an unfettered life, um, and to have a good time. And if you put yourself in a position of every parent of those guys in that video, and you say those same things you'd say on those comments to those parents in person, I'd hope to God you'd change your tone. Because think about your favorite music artist out there, and think about the people that go to the front row of that music artist and are blitzed, on drugs, passed out, called the ambulance. Does that take away from you loving the music from your artist? Like, not at all. Does watching 20 people circle around and have a moment like take away from a community if that's not your vibe? No, not at all. If I was in Paris, would I have been there? Yes. Would I have been in the center, in the middle? I don't know. Would I, it doesn't, I don't know. It would be a game time decision of whether I would want to be in the middle or on the outskirts. But the people that were in the middle chose to be in the middle and they're having a good time. And if you want to use that video in a negative way to cause the antithesis of economic energy, of the connectiveness that all those gents have together, like, that's just a path to be negative to lose for you.
Yeah, and in fact, the video goes viral, and I think we're gonna look back on that as like a meme, like a meme to remember for the D God story. And if you recall, Bored Ape Yacht Club had a very similar kind of experience with one of their first big parties. I think it was at that original like NFT NYC
Yeah, yeah,
party
yeah.
where it
Yeah.
was almost like exactly the same type of feedback and FUD online as to like, look at these, dudes just like piling on each other. And like, we saw how that worked out.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And as someone who holds apes, like, to this day, I haven't been able to go to a club and jump around with people who held for 2 years. I'd love to do that, you know? And when that happens, record a video and FUD me so I can go viral, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we did we did ourselves and Jack and our listeners a service by unpacking some of the conversation from last week. I also really liked that kind of concept he shared with us about 15 blocks of fame. I thought that was catchy, and maybe we'll see him kind of like roll that into some type of art in the future. We do have a few other topics we want to touch on. There's a lot going on in the NFT space, and one of the most controversial and maybe polarizing topics right now is Blur, the marketplace that is incentivizing traders to basically bid in order to earn a future airdrop. They've already done a couple of airdrops here for their season 1 and 2, I think they call it. But so if you have the highest bid on one of the top collections on the Blur marketplace, you essentially earn points. And the more points that you earn, the larger future airdrop of Blur token you're going to get. And what we're seeing is that has driven up the volume of trading on the marketplace tremendously. And two people who, are fairly familiar in the space because they're Bored Ape holders, Machi Big Brother and Franklin, are essentially like market making, providing a lot of liquidity. And so if you look at a chart of the Ethereum NFT volumes, you're going to see that the introduction of the Blur farming has caused like almost like a 2x plus volume spike. And that's because of the liquidity that people like Franklin and Machi Big Brother are bringing to the market. Now, on one hand, that's the game, right? Like they do this, they can earn coin. They're playing the game. On the other hand, it's great because there's liquidity where you kind of like establishes this like floor price with all these bids, And that brings me personally like a sense of comfort to know like, hey, that liquidity is there. When you have an NFT that's valuable and it doesn't have a bid on it, or it has like a bid that's way less than the floor value, it's not a great feeling. But when you see bids that are right up against the floor, that actually brings me like some comfort and potentially could draw more people into the space. Now, the downsides that I see is Blur specifically, it's really like a lot less about the actual NFT itself. It's become kind of like a trading venue where it almost doesn't matter what an NFT it is. It's just about the volume and the bids and the trading action. And it's kind of like a departure from some of the things that we value in the space, like specific traits and rarity and kind of like conceptualizing the art and branding. And so when you're seeing is projects like Bored Ape Yacht Club, Mutant Ape Yacht Club, some of the more rare pieces, they're trading a lot closer to the floor because the people who are doing this kind of bid farming and a lot of these trades, they're more concerned with the actual ETH that's transacting and less concerned with the rarity of those NFTs. Now that does present some opportunity because if we're thinking long term or we're thinking about, hey, like I want to hold and own really special NFTs, I think there's an opportunity here that while people are farming Blur, more long view collectors could be farming grails, because suddenly you can get like a really nice M2 mutant just above floor when, a handful of months ago, you would have had to pay, 25% plus premium for an M2. And now suddenly we're down to like, maybe like a 5% premium. So there may be some opportunities there. Good in general. What do you think about Blur and the whole farming and the coin and this mechanics that are at play and how it impacts the NFT market as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, originally a lot of people on Twitter and still kind of are talking about it on Twitter. They just saw it as a negative thing because a limited party, which are the whales that own the majority of the NFTs in the collection, were the only ones really farming this Blur token. And it was it gamifies the bids, and a lot of people were sick of it. I have a totally different approach, like on a fully zoomed out approach at a little bit more of a macro level. I think it's great. The people who use Blur are, I compare them to Bloomberg terminal users in the retail investor world, people that, actually do TA and trade analysis. Back in, the early thousands, we didn't have Robinhood or Easy Software on E-Trade or Charles Schwab to be, doing your own trades. So you typically had somebody managed through a Bloomberg terminal. I think that's where we're at right now in the Web3 world. Like Blur is a advanced trading platform. And you're right. It creates stratified layers now where you have the advanced traders in Blur. You have the Grail hunters or the showcase on OpenSea or other kind of aggregators that make it a little bit more presentable comparative to like, window shopping on Fifth Ave or whatever it may be. And then you have the people outside the space that just couldn't give two cares about trading volume, and they're just cold storage long back holders. So I think it's a good thing. I think what people don't understand in the Web3 space is they don't understand there are personas for these things. So being an advanced trader and having liquidity accessible to you in a moment's notice is extremely important for day traders. And that's what they're building. And it's synonymous with Wall Street. And I know everyone in Web3 doesn't want to do it. They don't want to say Web3 is Wall Street, right? Like, they don't want to go institutionalized. But at the end of the day, like, sorry to tell you, but when you build incentive models, there are people who become subject matter experts of those incentive models. They get closer to the core, like Wall Street was insulated in New York, and then the network can expand out. But if you want to be, making the deals for in bulk on the floor at the stock exchange, you got to be in New York, right? Now, if you want to plug into other order books, you can do so remotely. But to this day, still, like, if you're pricing an IPO, you got to be on the floor of Wall Street. So
Yeah. I like
that's
what
how
you're
I look
saying
at
there.
Blur.
One, yeah, different personas, right? And there's kind of like something for everybody here. And that makes sense. Another thing that happened as a result of this is OSF and Mando, who were holders of a pretty sizable bound of Yuga assets, including 72 apes, essentially looked at this opportunity as a rare occasion where they could literally liquidate, all of those apes in one transaction. And that's essentially what they did. They loaded up a transaction to take advantage of those layers of bids and just unloaded 72 apes. I think over 5,000 each worth of bored apes onto the blue farmers. And I think Machi Big Brother absorbed that, and people on chain were kind of watching the action. And I think he had to bring in some liquidity on the sidelines in order to kind of weather that storm. And to me, when I first saw it, I was like, kind of like, like I didn't really like it. I didn't really like the idea that like a prominent community member would kind of like unload that many apes onto somebody else. But I did get a take from somebody on
Interesting.
Twitter that's,
That was your take. You thought that was like a nefarious act.
yeah, no, I wouldn't say nefarious because I think it's fair game. I just think that it's like in contrast to some of like the community vibe and like the kind of productive, long view building that we speak about a lot in space. And a lot of people, when I kind of made a couple of posts about this on Twitter, people like, look, it is what it is. That's the game. You put the bids, like you got to be accountable. And if, somebody wants to rip liquidity and just to do that, that's what they want to do. And I get that. I just like thought, gosh, like the reality is though, it really closed out like a phenomenal trade. And somebody kind of checked me on my perspective when I was kind of saying like, I don't know, it's kind of like not what I would have done. I didn't think it was like the right thing to do from like a community perspective. However, somebody was like, look, the blur farmers need to get checked too. Like there has to be that. And I was like, that's true. There has to be some checks and balances. There has to be some risk to farming those coins. You want to farm those coins, you're at risk for suddenly eating a bunch of NFTs and having to figure out how to get out of that position. So, like, what's your kind of feel as a board ape holder since Mint, as a productive contributing member to the community? Like, what's your take on that?
It's incentive models at play. Machi and Franklin are incentivized to farm Blur token. OSF Mando are incentivized to ensure that they're holding a bag or they're able to liquidate a bag. I actually I saw it as a very positive event because OSF Mando having 71 apes and thinking that they want to liquidate at any point is a risk. It's a vulnerability to the price model. And it always is with any asset class. If you have a scarce asset and somebody holds more than, 0.5%, and they might be finicky with their hold strategy, or they're thinking of selling in a mass number, then it upsets the consistency of the press. So I was happy that OSF and Mando decided to unload at a time where they knew the collection could withstand the blow. The bids were out there. So the offers were there. And in my perspective, OSF Mando took opportunity to offload everything at the, without having the community at risk. Now, OSF Mando had their hates when we ran to 150. I'm sure they were talking about dumping majority at that price, and that would have tanked the price in an unorganic way. an inorganic way. So, I mean, yeah, I'm kind of throwing out a variable out there that I don't know. So I don't know if they're ever looking to sell at the 150 ETH mark. But the reality is there was a buyer out there that was saying, hey, I'm willing to take on 71 apes at a price per each ape. And there was another party out there that said, hey, I have 71 apes and I'm willing to off them in a bulk deal. Like, regardless of rarity, I'm taking all the bids that are out there. In my perspective of a marketplace, somebody who didn't want these apes in bulk wanted them in bulk. I rather have those apes in custody of the person who wants them. Now, you could throw variables at me and say, well, he only wants them because the blur token. Once the blur token comes, he'll get that and they'll dump apes. Okay, let's figure that out when we get there, and let's see what incentive models Machi is motivated by that. I personally think Machi's going to come out on top because Paraswap, I know, is working on trait-based lending. And so I think by Machi having 71 apes, he has some apes in there that he can loan for, at disproportionate amounts because of certain traits. He also has a deep bag of grails that he can loan off of. Machi's good. Machi's great. I feel like they're in good hands.
Well, what ended up happening is that I think he took on too much risk in terms of those NFTs. He went too long on those NFTs, and he did have to kind of get himself out of that position. And that did involve dumping some apes and mutants and other collections. So this did cause a kind of cascade.
So I hadn't followed all of that. Like, honestly, the play-by-play blur is way too wild to follow all that. So, given what I said, Machi's good. Now, obviously, you're saying that Machi wasn't good, so he had to make some considerations. But from my perspective, the floor, even with Bindao liquidation risks, the floor didn't move that much.
Well, actually, what happened is that the floor, he kind of was trying to hold off and bring in other liquidity, but at some point he had to capitulate and regain his position of liquid Ethereum so he could continue to play the blur farming game. So it caused
but he's continuing to farm blur. So he took on too much risk for being illiquid, but he didn't take on too much risk for his appetite.
Yeah, what ended up happening is that it caused a very temporary dip, and it affected multiple collections because these guys are not just farming on bake and make. They're also farming on checks. They're also farming on OPEPin. Franklin had swept a few hundred OPEPin, and he had to unload a lot of those. So it actually temporarily created opportunity. There was a big dip. There was a lot of panic. And you know what happens in the NFT space? Once panic sets in, the undercutters come out and the dips can become violent. But what was nice to see is that it sprung back, and in a matter of a couple days, we're pretty much at where we were at before. So it does show the resiliency of the space. And for people who, had the foresight to buy that dip, they came out ahead. So it was a really interesting event. I thought it was worthwhile to discuss today. And I do, appreciate your input on that.
And I'm not, for people listening, I'm not too deep in the daily trade numbers. So, for people that do trade day to day and they care about price action daily, for sure, this is a variable that messes up your day. But I would never recommend day trading these things. It's just not my persona. My persona is go long and pay attention and pick up things that are for the culture along the way. So it's a little irrelevant to me, but I understand people I just want to put out there that I do understand it can mess up people's days when their living is trading these things.
Yeah, you kind of have to zig when other people are zagging too. So what you see is people are essentially day trading certain collections, like the top 20 collections of NFTs. And, that's happening. So one approach, if that's not your thing, like that's not really my thing, is maybe taking the opportunity because the rarity is kind of going out the window here to snipe some rares, snipe some grails. And the other thing to look at here is on the fine art side, like the art block side, the squiggles, these kinds of collections, they're not part of this day trading, blur farming meta that's going on. So while
Right.
everybody's over here doing that, maybe the alpha is to look at some of those collections that we do believe are going to withstand a test of time. And because they don't have the volume right now, they don't have the eyeballs on them right now. So it might be time to strike a squiggle. Yeah.
Yeah, and CryptoPunks are not
And
in this blur
CryptoPunks.
farming.
Absolutely right.
So what is your take on the blur farming mechanics here? Like, do you really think it's worth the squeeze?
I think that having that floor level of bids so close to the floor price is a very like psychologically healthy thing for people who are holding NFTs. I think it takes away some of the downside, and I want to say it just leaves more room for upside. But the flip side is that because when you have this day trading going on, like as soon as these things go up a tiny bit, they get dumped. So it's literally kind of keeping things more range bound, with the exception of that event with OSF and Mando selling off all those apes. So
Yeah, and to that point too, like these, if Franklin and Machi can manage their risk effectively while doing this, like they could probably forever be the bid providers, right? And that could be a business. Like that, they just are the bid makers. There are only there are only 9,998 apes because 2 were burned. So there are only 9,998 of these things. So it's very easy to build a whole business off of being the bid book. Franklin and Machi can be the bid book. The other people can be the loan book, and these businesses can be built around it. So I think that I think people should get used to it. People should understand that, like, Machi might be more profitable than he's ever been being the bid book. And I wonder, like, I really hope they can manage their risk. I think Franklin has proven, Franklin catches a lot of hooks. He catches so much on Twitter. And, hey, the dude has managed risk really well over a volatile asset class for 2 years.
yeah, and what's cool is that these guys are both like accessible. They're both active participants, and so they're making markets, providing liquidity, but they're also somebody that's approachable that you can talk to. So definitely wanted to hit on that topic. I'm glad we did. One more topic here that I want to hit on for this episode is the key. Mongrel, an 18-year-old professional video game player, professional gamer that won the #1 spot in the Dookie Dash game. He first got a bid from the Pixel Vault UpDAO of 690 ETH, which he replied to the bid saying, maybe if you double this, I'll consider it. I ultimately did get a bid for 999 ETH and then accepted a bid for 1,000 ETH. So Mongrel pulled 1,000 ETH straight out of Jimmy the Monkey's butt. Goodmonth ETH. What do you think about the 1,000 ETH sale and the impact that it has on the Yuga ecosystem and just kind of like the psychology about what's going on with this game and everything?
Yeah, 1.6, 1.6 million, 1.6 $6-5 million, depending on the day, of what this was sold for. I don't know the esports world. I did quick dash research and got a quick confirmation that might be the highest esports bag of a competition for a single player. In the space, like I know teams have brought home bigger prize bags, but I also know teams are sponsored and payouts go every which way into individuals. So, correct me. We'll cut this if I'm wrong, but I think 1.6 M's is the highest an individual has ever been paid for an esports game.
Yeah, I'd heard that this was in the top 3 overall, but to your point, maybe the number 1 and 2 were the teams, and this was like an individual collecting that much. And so we can double check on that. But I guess the question here is, what do you think this does for people who are not currently in NFT space, but do play video games? Obviously, like that's going to open up some eyes and bring some more people into the space. But what do you think is the impact of gamers coming into this ecosystem with a goal of essentially bagging some very valuable NFT through a game and then wanting to cash out on that?
Look, there's a lot of people out there that dream of a world of no advertising, no adverts in front of them. Just they get to experience what they want to experience, and no one's talking about this. But that's what you just got. You got a game with no advertisements. You got a prize that was a digital product. And due to the network of blockchain, you got to monetize your prize because someone else wants it. Because marketplace dynamics. Because someone was willing to pay for it. You didn't have to be sponsored by company X or company Y. You didn't have anyone foot your bill. You had access to game on your browser. You had the skills to win the key. You had the marketplace of Ethereum to sell the token and sell the key. And to your question, what do I think this does to the gaming community? I think it flips them on their head. If you want to go be a big esports gamer right now, you need sponsors, you need distribution, you need your YouTube channel, you need your viewers, you need your hype, you need you need your audience. In the Web3 world, you can game and you just need a network to sell what you've earned with a brand that creates things of value. That's Yuga.
Yeah, and I heard a good take recently that it's not going to be called blockchain gaming. It's not going to be called Web3 gaming. It's going to be called gaming. And so I'm a little torn on the incentive model because up until this point, essentially like the participants who've been like collecting NFTs, collecting Bored Apes, whether that's individuals or DAOs or companies, they're kind of incentivized to hold those assets and use them for various reasons, IP, other use cases, maybe just to sell at a later point. But I'm a little concerned about this concept of people who are going to come into the space just to play the game, and then their intent with the prize is not really to like hold the NFT necessarily, but it's just to like liquidate the NFT. And so who are they selling it to? They're kind of selling it back to us, right? Like they're selling it back to
you're selling it back to the ecosystem. You're selling it back to someone who cares. It's the same premise as showing up to an esports tournament. You're participating because advertisers have set it up for you. The game creator has set up the stage because they've built all these platform advertising promotional plays off of it. Like, yes, you're playing a game, but the prize pool is because it's an ecosystem that's been culled together for you to extract a percentage of the fee. And And now you can play with very low barrier of entry. You don't have to, like, you can qualify for, from a home desk. You do need an internet connection. You do need a computer. But it's opportunity for people to hit to the gaming world and make a name for themselves without having a distribution. And they can sell it back to a community that can monetize their efforts. And it's not going to be standard payouts, The price was set for 1,000 for this key. Will the next one of one be 1,000 ETH? Will that be a precedent? Maybe, maybe not. Don't know. But like that monetization of it, I don't know. The people that were fading the sale, saying like, I don't know, would you take it? Would you sell? Dude, the guy played a game. Hopefully he had fun. If he had fun playing the game and he won and he took home a bag of 1.6 M's, where he can go buy back into the ecosystem if he wants, or take it home and do whatever he wants to do with his USD. Bravo.
Props to him. And the reality is, like, the game, for professional gamer, it's like pretty straightforward game. Yeah, it's competitive. Everybody's playing the same game, so it's competitive. But how attractive is this, right? To somebody who's thinking that they could play video games at a high level like that, or maybe somebody that just aspires to. Then, like you said, from their home, from their computer, can play a relatively simple game with that kind of upside. I think there's no question that this story will go, viral and will be talked about and will kind of penetrate way outside of our Web3 bubble here. So with that, good, any kind of final words to leave our listeners before we sign off today?
Yeah, I do. Shout out to all the listeners that listened to Jack's interview. Let us recap what's going on in the space today. ETH Denver's going on this week, so everyone that's out there have a good time. I'm sitting at home working on product and building, launching for brands out of the K-Cap here, app of Goodmonth Labs that we're about to launch South by Southwest. If you're there, let us know. Hit us up in the YouTube comments. We'd love to meet. We might even record an episode there at our office in Austin. So that'd be exciting. But other than that, FaXx, we just got to keep it rolling, keep the eyes peeled, keep it update on the OPEPin refreshes, the checks refreshes, and just get after this next Yuga game, Evo, whatever the heck they got going on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we didn't talk about this, but Jack did tease what we think is the OPEPin PFP concept, and it's fire, man. I love it. From the moment I saw it, I was like, all right, this is sick. It's different. It hits. We'll see. We'll leave that kind of as more information comes in. But we do have some really exciting guests coming up in the next couple weeks. I don't want to spoil the surprises, but I'm really looking forward to it. And I think it was really good to have this opportunity to take stock here and not really have somebody directly follow Jack, because that would have been a tall order here, because that interview really did hit. If you enjoy the podcast, please go back, check out some of the other things we've recorded here. I think there's a lot of high quality content. This is episode 15. This Goodmonth Labs production.
15!
Never fade. It's not a flash in the pan. We're here to stay. This is proof of work. Follow @NeverFade NFT on Twitter. Subscribe to the YouTube. And thanks for joining us today. Have a great week. AZB. Roll us out, bud.
That's a bad bet.
Let's go.
That's a bad bet. Verifying everything. That's a bad bet. If the bags check less, about to burn back to back, flipping not cheap when that Jenny Duh hits. That's the race to 250 in the world, and you chose to sleep. That's a bad bet. If you wake up checkless, no more people without bags, yet they need status. Running head first with the VV check thirst. Never heard of a hearse, but they connecting the dots.